Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second session. My name is Sarah Sussman, and I'm the curator of the French and Italian collections at Stanford, and I'm really pleased to present this wonderful panel entitled Strategies for Collections and Partnerships. The speakers will be speaking about about collection development, but from really some different perspectives, and I think that you'll all find it really very interesting. I'm going to give very brief introductions of all four panelists, and then we'll just go in the order that they are in the program, and we'll hopefully have some time for discussion and questions afterwards. So our first panelist is Michele Casalini, who has a background in modern languages and literatures, but also in information technology and management. And most of us, I think, know him because he is the managing director of the family-run company Casalini Libri. And he will be speaking on collection development in the humanities and social sciences, particularly from the perspective of a vendor. Next, Claude Potts, who has been the librarian for Romance languages at UC Berkeley since 2007. And he is responsible for curating and providing research support relating to Berkeley's collections of materials in all formats from Western Europe. And he'll be speaking about CIFNAL, which has been mentioned a little bit earlier, but I think that it will be a good opportunity to learn more about CIFNAL for those who don't know it, and also talk a little bit about how collections are integrated into this initiative. Third, Kaiser Walker, who is Director of Collections for Cornell University Libraries in Ithaca, New York. And he manages the library's collection budget and oversees the staff of 45 subject librarians. He's really interested in and involved in national and local efforts to promote sustainability and openness in scholarly communications. And finally, Lydia Uziel, who's the head of the Western Languages Division at Harvard Libraries, and who earlier this morning mentioned that when she returns, will also be taking on Slavic collections in that capacity as well. She provides leadership oversight and coordination in the collection developments for the humanities and social sciences for Europe and the English-speaking countries. And is also co-chair of the Collections and Content Development Standing Committee at Harvard. And she'll be speaking about a very specific collection development, the creation of a very specific collection around an important current event. So without hesitating much more, I'm going to hand it over to Michele.
Thank you all for being here. This talk is an abridged version of a paper that could not be prepared without the contribution of my colleagues, in particular Patricia, Antonio, and Ruth. Collection development and its continuity are at the core of Research Libraries' mission. From our perspectives as an Italian and European library supplier, collection development has traditionally been a dynamic and amorphous concept. Institutions worldwide employ a range of approaches when it comes to collection development. These are often defined by national and cultural perspectives, framed by monetary, geographical, and linguistic challenges, as well as by the influence of governments and administrations. In over 50 years of business, we have seen the growth of the approval plans widely used in North America, the use of national policies like those in Germany and France, as well as faculty and subject specialist lead acquisitions in UK, Italy, and Spain, to name but a few strategies. The challenge of facilitating this range of perspectives is not eased by the publishing market of many countries in the humanities and social sciences, characterized by fragmentation, cultural diversity, and a certain resistance to change. This means that there are many factors to consider when planning for the future of collection development in this area. We have identified 7 main challenges that emerged in the last 20 years of collecting academic content. HSS versus HTM, foreign language, market, budget, digital evolution, metrics, and metadata. HSS versus STM. When directly comparing these two fields, it is generally acknowledged that they produce publications that are remarkably different in terms of format, lifetime, and consumption. STM publications are overwhelmingly articles with a short lifetime that are exposed to a large readership, whereas HSS publications are more likely to be monographs that can remain relevant for many years but may only be used by very specific communities. Sara Tedesco from Yale presented very in-depth statistics to the West Group at the ALA meeting in January 2016, focusing on the German, Italian, and French language collection in the library, which illustrates this. While we cannot, of course, provide similar usage data for the print books we supply, we do have an interesting overview for the usage of the e-content in the Torrosa Digital Library. These are shown in this figure and support the trend for older monographs observed in the Tedesco's data from Yale, with the vast majority of titles used being between 3 and 10 years old. Prices of packages and individual journals in the STM sector steadily increase. Inversely, the average price of the comparatively inexpensive monographs is in average falling, placing yet more pressure on publishers in this field. The producers of this type of literature also vary, with STM markets being controlled by large international groups and the markets of HSS publications often being characterized by a large number and variety of small independent publishers, including institutions and societies. The fundamental battle between STM and HSS is how, at a national and international level, also within the European Union, to maximize the return to society of investment in science and technology, whilst recognizing at the same time the essential contribution that HSS makes to cultural progress and innovation in general, as well as its important contribution toward democracy, as explored in Martha Sussman's volume, Not-for-Profit, Why Democracy Needs the Humanities. Foreign language. STM research is more often than not published in English. In contrast, the language of origin is of particular importance to HSS as it has a closer and more significant relationship with the culture in which the research is rooted. Another problem in publishing in a language other than English is the difference in the impact to reach of the research. There is a difficult relationship between publications and tenure faced by younger academics who rely on the impact on their research to gain an academic position. The inclusion of an article in a well-established traditional journal indicates high-quality research that has undergone rigorous peer review and is of significant importance. These higher impact journals, often published in open access, another aspect that struggles to be widely adopted in the Southern European publishing market, like most high impact journals, are in English. For the humanities, this represents yet another force driving researchers away from publishing in their native language of research. This is delicate, as original language research in particular contributes to the documentation and preservation of cultural variety and vitality, aiding comprehension of the world in its diversity and the communities that inhabit it. Its presence and the extent of it in a collection can be seen as a reflection of the outlook of the institution to whom it belongs. Without it, we risk losing crucial aspects and topics that can contribute to taking forward cultural heritage for future generations, along with an impoverishment of knowledge and a weakening of cultural diversity that could take a long time to recover. Market. The market of HSS scholarly publications rely on the demand and level of production from the academic community. Humanities, and in particular language departments, are in steady decline. This would appear to be a rather bleak outlook for language studies at an undergraduate level, and we cannot comment on how this affected library acquisitions to support these courses. However, we are well placed to observe the trend in the supply of scholarly publications for postgraduate and higher study. As of the time of writing, the most likely destinations of the titles that we supply is the US, with almost half of those ending up in EV+ institutions, as shown in this slide. As an example on how different acquisition strategies impact on collections, this figure and table show the purchasing pattern of 3 different purchasing approaches of 3 institutions from 3 nations with similar budget for Italian history titles during the years 2014-2016. The graph shows that over 65% of the titles are unique. 15% are present in 2 libraries, less than 10% are present in all 3. For limit of time, I skip now the further key topic, budget, metrics, digital evolution, and metadata, and would like to concentrate on cooperation. Cooperative acquisitions optimize purchasing while ensuring that specialized subject areas and geographical content are represented in at least one collection and therefore available to researchers. Although the practice makes perfect financial sense for libraries, it has undoubtedly had repercussions for the publishing world. Even collaborative acquisitions programs have suffered from growing economic pressure. 2 European examples that were already mentioned this morning. In Germany, the Sondersammelgebiete program evolved in Fachinformationssysteme, and in France, CADIST evolved in Collection d'Excellence. From the many US initiatives, I would like to mention Marley. Marley is a joint program between the New York Public Library, New York University, and Columbia University, which serves as a means to expand e-content access in order to better serve their researchers, experimenting also hybrid acquisitions models that maintain historical expenditure, applying price parameters that sustain the selected publishers. It is, of course, impossible to talk about collaborative collections and not mention Danhausen. Those visions shaped a generation of librarians and indeed continues to impact collection development strategies. Last year, Harvard hosted a symposium in Hazen's honor dedicated to his very subject. What emerged from this important event is a leading role of the EV Plus partnership with its crucial mission statement, I quote, to embrace a vision for collection development and management which recognize our preeminent academic research and special collections as one great collection in support of the teaching, research, and public mission of our respective institutions and the global scholarly community. The 2016 publication, Shared Collections, Collaborative Stewardship, edited by Dawn Hale, also addresses in great depth through a series of thought-provoking essays the complexity of collaboration. Several important aspects emerge from his study. Collaborative collection for monographs is still in its early phases. Do costs involved in structured collaboration make long-term sense? Who provides governance? The absence of aggregated record management system. This last point was also a great concern of Hazen's, and indeed his essays, Provocation and Irritation for a Globalized Research Library, ends with the question, how can area and international studies community participate in designing tools and services that will energize the information source and aggregation most relevant to its concern? And again, mentioned in his 9 model for collection development, where number 9 is embrace discovery and analysis as today collections development. BibFrame, the framework initiated by the Library of Congress that brings the metadata of the library, archive, and museum domains into a data model that is in line with the World Wide Web Consortium specifications, seems to be a promising ground for this need. As you probably know, a library-driven research and development project, ShareVDE, is ongoing, involving 16 North American libraries with the aim to reach with short phases an experience on which the community can build further plans. We feel the privilege and the responsibility to carry out this project with Stanford University as its helm. The future. We embrace the opportunity offered by this symposium to begin a conversation on collection development at a global level. The diversity in approaches to collection development internationally provides the foundation for productive discussions about how best to plan for the future. These are unlikely to result in a one-size-fits-all solution, but by sharing experiences at a national and global level. With contribution from those partners with unique viewpoints, libraries will be able to set the best course for themselves, maintaining collection that expresses a precious diversity in the wide spectrum of disciplines that include original language research. To remain relevant, libraries face many challenges when considering their collections. The importance of the material contained within libraries should never be underestimated, and in the modern era, the ability for patrons to access the content proves also a greater challenge. Some conclusions. Collection development in the humanities and social sciences has seen a great deal of change in recent decades, and if it is to survive, keeping its mission as its core, it must continue to evolve. Libraries are faced with the 7 key challenges mentioned earlier. To overcome these hurdles, we believe that the community must engage in greater discussion on collection development at a global level to discover which model works for certain type of institutions and to accelerate the level of innovation within the community. These are the forces to give collections the momentum to move forward into the next decade and beyond. Today's meeting leads us to hope that the driving force for the information chain can take forward the challenge of collaborative collections, especially in those areas that risk marginalization at a global and not simply national level. As Mr. Ryle says, inspire action. Thank you.
Good morning. Wonderful to be here in this beautiful library. Thanks for hosting this symposium. I brought a little friend with me. This is a Ninja Turtle that my 4-year-old son asked me to carry around with me on this trip. So I'm just going to put him up there, and if I get really nervous, he'll be doing the talking. So I'm going to give a brief history of CIFNAL. And I know there are several of you in the audience who are founding members of CIFNAL, so feel free to correct me after the 15 minutes. But I'll do my best for this concise presentation on a decade of collaboration. CIFNAL began, let's see if I can use this, there we go. CIFNAL, the collaborative initiative of French language collections, has been promoting and facilitating the cooperative exchange of ideas and resources between Francophone and North American research libraries since 2006. It is the youngest of the expertise groups within the Global Resources Program administered through the Center for Research Libraries. This paper provides a brief history of the initiative's activities over the past decade, highlighting its contributions to digital scholarship, building regional and international alliances, and cultivating relations with information professionals from across and outside of the U.S. In a paper delivered at the Conference of Western European Specialist Section, WES, held in Paris in 2004, Thomas Kilton of the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign stressed the urgency of establishing a collaborative group uniting French-speaking librarians in North America and their colleagues abroad. He wrote, "The successes of various projects of the North American Global Resources Network and promoting closer initiatives between individual librarians in separate countries suggests that the time for a French-American resources project to enhance library collections between France, the United States, and Canada is ripe." He was inspired by the success of the German North American Resources Partnership, GNARP. He outlined 4 basic components of such an initiative: collection development and reference, bibliographic control, digital projects, and document delivery. Shortly after, Kilton served as the chair of an ad hoc committee created by WES, charged with exploring the feasibility of the French North American Resources Partnership, known at the time by the acronym FNARP. In their meeting at the American Library Association's ALA in Chicago in 2005, they created an advisory group and a steering committee charged with setting out the agenda and development plan for the initiative. It is here that they voted to change the name to the Collaborative Initiative for French and North American Libraries, CIFNAL. And it was documented in the minutes that a small number of enthusiastic partners would be enough to move the project forward. You can see some familiar names on that slide who was at that meeting in Chicago. After several meetings at ALA, which for those of you who haven't been to ALA, it meets either 2 or 3 times a year, depending on the year. It was at the annual conference in New Orleans in 2006 that CIFNAL incorporated. Most of the effort the following 2 years focused on completing the development plan, developing a list of potential contacts, and devising a sustainable funding strategy. The Goals Working Group reported that it had accomplished its mission of identifying attainable goals. Tangible projects began to take shape, including the microfilm project, which aimed to identify, locate, and publicize major sets of microfilm pertaining to the history, culture, language, and literature of France and Francophone countries. Another librarian took the lead on assessing North American libraries' coverage of regional and local French research resources, including publications of learned societies, local institutions, and associations, as well as specialized publishers. A third foundational project of CIFNAL was the strong subject collections among North American French libraries. Its aim was to identify strong French collections, strong sub-areas within those collections, and special collections with strong French collections in the U.S. CIFNAL endorsed these 3 projects because they showed promise for researchers in North America, but also might be of interest to Francophone partners abroad. In the arena of collection development, Sebastian Hurl of Harvard and Sarah Wenzel, both are here today, identified a number of electronic resources and explored possibilities for consortial pricing for CIFNAL. Arranging for discounted rates for databases of interest to member libraries was seen as a way of attracting more institutions to CIFNAL. In the first years, licenses and consortial pricing were negotiated for full-text databases, Classique Gagné Numérique, Le Grand Robert Électronique, and Cairn. And these were just the beginning. Based at the University of Chicago, Artful provides access to thousands of French texts online. Early on, CIFNAL members and Artful discussed possible digital projects and decided to pursue one, creating a text corpus of a collection of 300 digitized chapbooks printed in France in the 17th to early 19th centuries. This project was called the Bibliothèque Bleue Online. It became the first collaborative project of CIFNAL and part of Artful's collection of openly accessible full-text corpora. How to establish relationships with French institutions was a recurring topic at CIFNAL meetings. Determining exactly what CIFNAL could offer French libraries remained a key challenge. Knowing that IFLA would take place in Quebec in August 2008, a working group was formed to explore the possibility of hosting a satellite meeting there. They discovered that an international group of Francophone librarians and archivists called IFBD had already made plans to hold their inaugural Congress in Montreal as a satellite meeting of IFLA. Their director, Régent Savard, invited working group chair Jeffrey Larson and CIFNAL to attend. 11 CIFNAL members enthusiastically responded, which was particularly impressive considering there were only 19 CIFNAL members at the time. Dominique Coulomb of Brown University was the chair of CIFNAL at the time. She wrote, IFBD gave the opportunity to 250 librarians from 60 Francophone countries to exchange ideas, their expertise, and network in the language they have in common. The chairs of CIFNAL projects received valuable feedback at the Congress. Coulomb announced CIFNAL would serve as the first point of entry or contact for all Francophone libraries for questions regarding holdings and access to collections in the U.S., with Francophone libraries offering the same service to their partners. Livre Hebdo, one of the most important weeklies for French publishers, librarians, and booksellers, ran a short piece just after the Congress on Larson and CIFNAL. CIFNAL's positive reception at the first IFBD meeting was an accomplishment in itself and was well documented in not only the fall 2008 newsletter, West newsletter, but also in CRL's Focus on Global Resources in spring 2009. CIFNAL indeed had made a splash at the top, and at the top of its to-do list was to change its name once more, this time to be more inclusive of the French-speaking world beyond France. In its December meeting, the membership voted unanimously for the name change from keeping the acronym, from the Collaborative Initiative for French and North American Libraries to the Collaborative Initiative for French Language Collections, in order to better convey the association's intention to include the Francophone community outside of North America and France. By 2010, CIFNAL had grown to 29 institutional members and 13 personal members. Apart from the AFBD Congress, CIFNAL's next big success proved to be its alliance with the Digital Library of the Caribbean, which was led by Matthew Loving at the University of Florida. Not only had DLOC, the acronym, had been empowering Haitian libraries to take hold of their own cultural patrimony by digitizing equipment, providing digitization equipment and on-site workshops, but they were also cultivating relationships with librarians at the Université des Antilles et de la Guyane. In 2010, an agreement was forged between DLOC and the digital library Manioc to cross-harvest periodical data loads of new Caribbean content from the BNF, making them openly available through OAI. When an earthquake devastated Haiti on January 12, 2010, the focus on the collaborative work shifted to direct assistance to partners such as the Archives Nationales and Bibliothèque Nationale of Haiti. At the same time that it was continuing its digitization training with partner libraries, DLOC launched the Protecting Haitian Patrimony Initiative. During this same period, Sarah Sussman was invited by the Bulletin des Bibliothèques de France to contribute an article on French and Francophone collections in North America. The article was in line with one of the early goals of CIFNAL, while it also provided an informative overview of the collections that might appeal to Francophone scholars. After querying more than 20 librarians from CIFNAL institutions, the article was published in print and online, catching the attention of information professionals across the French-speaking world. While librarian exchanges were suggested as one way of engaging Francophone partners, it proved more practical to host interns. As early as 2009, several institutions such as Yale and UC Berkeley and others began hosting library school students from Antibes in Lyon. Because these graduate students are guaranteed employment in French libraries or archives upon matriculation, an additional benefit for CIFNAL was continued professional contact with librarians. Raphael Batz of Antibes served as a member-at-large of CIFNAL steering committee from 2013 through 2015. I'm going to skip a little since we're already getting close on time. Several CIFNAL members also attended the third Congrès in Limoges of AFBD. That was a good meeting. In May 2015, Sarah Howe of Cornell University was elected and continues as current chair of CIFNAL. Her chief contribution has been to organize this wonderful symposium, co-sponsored by CIFNAL, GNARP, and hosted by the German National Library. As is the case with other initiatives of the Global Resources Program, the chair and steering committee play an indispensable role in all of their activities, from writing bylaws to licensing e-resources to dispersing travel grants. CRL staff has provided consistent and dependable support at every step. CIFNAL benefits from an array of CRL's professional staff, including but not limited to Area Studies Program Manager Judy Alspa and James Simon, who is Vice President of Collections and Services. Without their presence and guidance, whether face-to-face or virtually, so many of CIFNAL's ideas would never have been realized. Collaborations between North American libraries would not be possible without CRL's tried and tested systems of centralized support and capacity. The two working groups which continue this day are the Collection Development Working Group and the Engaging Francophone Partners Working Group. They provide a robust framework for engagement for all CIFNAL activities. As you can see, CIFNAL has come a long way since 2004. Continued success can be met by identifying projects of scale that can be reasonably achieved, making greater efforts to include all members, both institutional and individual, and by continuing to open viable paths for international partners. Accurately promoting and taking credit for its achievements and disseminating them widely. And the fifth, continually assessing and redefining the scope of our collaborative work. Looking forward, here are a few thoughts on how CIFNAL might leverage current relationships and act on ideas. How might we assist with the initiatives of other global resources network groups, which actually we're doing in this symposium today and partnering with GNARP. But there are several other groups within the Global Resources Network. What other associations or meetings might we try to join outside of the U.S.? It's fantastic that so many members are also now involved with IFBD, but what other professional and scholarly associations might also lead to mutually beneficial collaborations? Are there existing bilateral agreements between North American and Francophone institutions that might be amenable to including other CIFNAL institutions? CIFNAL is only limited by its own collective vision and how much time its members, both individual and institutional, can contribute. Thank you.
So I'll just echo everyone else and say it really is wonderful to be in this beautiful space and at the National Library today. So thanks everyone for putting all of this together and bringing us all together. So I'm afraid this may seem a kind of grandiose title for such a brief presentation, which I will try to keep to 15 minutes. What I want to do today is to talk briefly about how Cornell University Library's collection has evolved from the start in the context of collaboration with other institutions. I want to highlight the relationship between the U.S. Research Library and Cornell University Library in particular, and German institutions, beginning in the 19th century, when German universities were learning explicitly from the Humboldtian model, importing concepts and structures from the modern German university, and then with reference to some historical and current examples, just really kind of superficial examples, I want to underscore parallels and differences between U.S. and German research libraries, and especially their approach to interinstitutional coordination of collections. Because all of this has to happen within 15 minutes, this will necessarily be a brief and schematic overview, and it may be open to charges of oversimplification or even superficiality, and for which I apologize in advance. And I do hope that it will shed a bit of light and provoke some discussion. So here's just some quick statistics on Cornell University Library's collection, which is a hybrid collection, as I guess all of our libraries are, of printed volumes, digital resources, maps, media, archival materials, artifacts of various kinds. I'll note that when we consider Cornell's entire collection's expenditures, including for the medical school library in New York City, we're now close to about 70% of expenditures going to electronic materials, for what that's worth. Along the bottom of the slide, you'll see a few areas that we consider particular strengths of Cornell's collection. So along with Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, which was founded in 1876, Cornell, which was founded in 1868, was explicitly established with reference to models of higher education that emerged in the German-speaking world in the 19th century, with the aim, as a recent monograph on the German university puts it, of realizing German scholarly ideals on American soil. Cornell's first president, Andrew Dixon White, had studied in Berlin and conceived of this new institution, Cornell, very much as a place to put into practice what he had observed in Berlin. The quote at the bottom is from his autobiography from 1906. And there's White himself. He served as president of Cornell University from 1866 to 1885, so almost 20 years. And during that time, actually, while he was serving as president of the university, he also was appointed as U.S. ambassador to Germany, which from 1879 to 81. So this sort of geopolitical overlap with research university building and research library building is there from the start. So during this nearly 20-year tenure as Cornell's president, White served also as minister to Russia and as president of the American delegation to the Hague Peace Conference in 1899, and then again for a second time as ambassador to Germany from 1897 to 1902. White appointed Cornell's first university librarian, Willard Fisk, who was a specialist in Northern European languages, Icelandic in particular, and he financed Fisk's European sojourns where the latter acquired books and manuscripts for the library and for White's personal collection. So White donated his 30,000 volume, I think that's right, 30,000 volume personal library to the university, where it formed an important core of the Cornell collection. This is the A.D. White library that you can still see if you visit us at Cornell someday. So now jumping way ahead to 1957, the Soviet launch of the Sputnik satellite in 1957 led to a sort of panic in the United States that the country had fallen behind its Cold War competitor in science and technology, and perhaps also in creative energy. And one fortuitous result of this was a massive investment in education by the federal government, not only at the university level, but also in elementary and secondary school education, up through postgraduate education. Along with the creation of DARPA, which brought us the internet, and NASA, which brought us the lunar landing, a direct response to the so-called Sputnik crisis was the establishment of the National Defense Education Act of 1958, which funded science, education in science and mathematics, and also in area studies in foreign languages, and stimulated a spectacular growth in library collections to serve these new fields of study, or newly beefed up fields of study, shall we say. So established in that, directly in the context of that post-Sputnik moment, Cornell's Olin Library was among the first of the U.S. academic libraries to be purpose-built as a research facility in the contemporary sense. The Cold War connection is perhaps driven home by the fact that Cornell opened this sort of forbidding concrete structure the same year that the Berlin Wall was erected. So just some superficial historical points. So with the rapid growth of scholarly publication output, along with the influx of funds to acquire, index, archive, and make accessible all of this content, there was a rapid growth of libraries at individual academic institutions, but this also necessitated interinstitutional collaboration. In particular, a growing appetite for research materials from around the world that mirrored the American post-1945 global role called out for coordinated approaches. Several of the initiatives and associations that have supported collaboration among U.S. institutions date from this post-war, post-Second World War era and from the Cold War years. So I'm going to say more about the Farmington Plan, which some of you will maybe remember in a moment. The U.S. federal funding for the national resource centers at various universities supported area studies programs, which of course always had a strategic aspect. These NRC grants are in fact specifically a provision of the post-Sputnik National Defense Education Act. So that Title VI funding that we hear about is Title VI of that act. Though it's weakened today, that program still exists at Cornell and elsewhere. Cornell and Cornell Library have been long-term grantees for multiple world areas, most notably in Southeast Asia. Library of Congress oversees acquisitions program, dates from around the same period. I'm going to not talk about the RLG conspectus, but many of you will know what that is and remember it. Absent from this slide, but should be included is, of course, the Center for Research Libraries, our sponsor today, International Consortium of University, College, and Independent Research Libraries that also has its, had its beginnings in the immediate post-war period, and also with the same sort of area studies focus. So again, going back to the Farmington Plan, I just want to highlight that because it has, I think, a number of things in common with the West German system of coordinated collection building that we've heard about already this morning, the Sondersammelgebiet program, which has recently been discontinued, as you've heard. The Farmington Plan was conceived during the Second World War and then finally initiated in 1947 as a means of recovering from wartime disruptions in the supply of international publications to libraries. Sponsored by the ARL, the Association of Research Libraries, from the mid-40s until the program was finally discontinued in 1972. The Farmington Plan was an ambitious attempt to coordinate acquisition of foreign publications on a national scale, though it ultimately fell far short, I guess, of its goals. The 1953 Farmington Plan handbook lists Cornell as, quote, responsible for all publications issued in Burma, Indochina, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaya, and Siam. Some of the names outdated, of course. So Southeast Asia is still an area of focus for Cornell, probably the most important collections area that we can point to at the library. We've already heard quite a bit about the SSG, the Sondersammelgebiet program in Germany, funded by the German Research Foundation this morning, but so I won't say much more about this here. But again, founded in that immediate post-war period with the goal of reconstructing collections that were destroyed in the war, were destroyed by the National Socialists, were somehow dispersed, and trying to reestablish those channels of material delivery. And I'm going to skip over this. I just wanted to say, to turn now to just two related collaborative initiatives that Cornell has been intensely involved in over the past several years. I think they're significant because they mark a shift toward a narrower focus for collaborative collecting from overarching national plans that were always problematic, especially in the radically heterogeneous U.S. academic landscape, toward more targeted relationships with close groups of partners. In 2010, Cornell University Library and Columbia University Libraries announced they would embark on what was being called a deep partnership, named after the shared abbreviation of the two institutions, 2CUL, or 2COOL as we called it, that set out to integrate and coordinate areas of collection development, some technical services function, and access for users. The partnership made great progress fairly quickly, but then eventually scaled back some of its more ambitious infrastructural aspirations. While the program isn't growing now, the key achievements in coordinating collection development for specific areas have, I believe, been successfully institutionalized between the two universities. Cornell and Columbia not only coordinate collecting in these fields, we actually share a single bibliographer position for each of these areas. It is significant that these successes are in global area studies, precisely the parts of the research collection that were targeted in previous generations of collaborative collection planning. How many minutes is that? 3. All right, well, I'll do my best. So a lot of our most intensive focus now in the area of collaborative collection development is in the context of the 13 institutions listed here that make up the Ivy Plus libraries, and some of which are involved also in overlapping collaborations like the ones that Michele mentioned, Marley and RECAP, for example. And I'm going to let you all have a close look at Galadriel Chilton's poster session for more details about Ivy Plus, but I should say that Ivy Plus took a great leap forward last year when we hired a director of collections initiatives who is charged with planning, implementing, and overseeing new collaborative collections initiatives that will further integrate the vast riches of our collective collection, and that person is Galadriel, who's with us today. Extremely fortunate to have her in the position. So I think, just wanted to say that there's a very wide sort of palette of activities beyond traditional collaborative acquisitions that is similar in some ways to the kinds of things that the FID, the specialized service program that has replaced the SSG is made up of. You've heard, I think, a lot about that program. I'll skip over it now. I was just going to point to the fact that, again, in 2011, you began to see this transition to the new system. I would say that, it was, of course, about shifting emphasis from print to electronic, but it was also intended, as you've heard, to disrupt expectations of continuity, with long-standing collection responsibilities potentially reassigned on the basis of 3-year competitive grants. It's been highly controversial here. I won't pretend to be qualified to weigh in on that debate, but I just want to bring it up as an important shift that I hope we can talk more about. I will say that it's introduced a number of innovative concepts, like the community licensing of electronic resources. That is a model I hope we might be able to learn from in the U.S. context. And Bernard Wiley from CRL has already pointed to some other sort of global collaborations that might emerge in connection with that transition. So a few themes that, that I'd like to point to, that I think the German and the U.S. context have to some extent in common. All of our libraries are undergoing a shift in which collections are seen first and foremost as a service, which means primarily a service to current researchers and thus a shorter temporal horizon for collection building. Understanding researcher needs means a tighter focus on current usage and an ethos of evidence-based decision-making and return on investment. One hears repeatedly in this context that comprehensive collecting is not achievable, but I suspect that previous generations of librarians involved in these kinds of collaborations also understood that comprehensiveness was neither achievable in a single institution nor collectively in a distributed collection. And they were also focused on serving immediate user needs, as the historical examples show us. What we are moving away from today, I think, might be more accurately described as a certain bibliographic rigor and a sense of collective responsibility for the prospective scholarly record, or maybe put differently, collection building as a fundamental component of the sustainability of scholarly communication, sort of echoing what Michele was getting at, I think. So this may bring us more flexible, user-focused collections. There are exciting opportunities for collaboration, including decisions about coordinated print retention planning, which is proceeding on multiple fronts. But along with gains, I think we can also acknowledge loss. It is no doubt the case that economic realities facing all of us mean that certain modes of collecting locally or in partnership with other institutions are not possible today. Politico-military panic in our era doesn't tend to lead to more spending on universities and their libraries. At the heart of the issue may be the question of how we are to define the research library and the research library collection today. And for that, I think we need to be able to frankly characterize the 21st century research library, which has come some distance from the Humboldtian model. It's a contentious terrain, but I think one on which we need to be players, hopefully in global and increasing collaboration. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and I would like to thank you, the organizers, for inviting me and for giving me this unique opportunity to present some new approaches to distinctive French language collections at Harvard. In this very short presentation, I will describe methodology that we used for creation of an archive documenting a current socio-political event, and more precisely, documenting the aftermath of the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attack in France. I will also outline some challenges and opportunity we encountered while working on this project. About 1 hour after the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attack in January 2015, an image of the slogan "Je suis Charlie" was posted to Twitter by Joachim Ronsin, a French artist and journalist. He created the image because he lacked words to express himself. "Je suis Charlie" trended at the top of Twitter hashtag, the day of the attack. By the following afternoon, it had appeared more than 3 million times. By the next day, more than 5 million times. A counter hashtag, Je ne suis pas Charlie, also appeared as expression of disagreement with the unconditional support of Charlie Hebdo. It was used by those who accused the magazine of racism. After events, Je suis Charlie or Je ne suis pas Charlie became international expression of support to or distance from the stance attributed to Charlie Hebdo with regard to religion in general and to Islam in particular. The Harvard Library decided to create the Charlie Archive collection for two important reasons. The first was the impact that this terrorist attack had in France and internationally. It really sparked a very vigorous debate about fundamental political and ethical issues such as freedom of expression, the relation between state, religion, and society, and also respect for others' beliefs. At Harvard, we felt an urgency to document this debate by collecting not only the mainstream publishing output, but also by collecting primary source materials. Artifacts that, if not collected soon after the event, they risk disappearing in the future. Primary source materials that might not otherwise be captured in any library collection, but are crucial to making sense of these events and conversations. Our goal was also to document an emotion around these two slogans, Je suis Charlie, je ne suis pas Charlie. And we wanted to document it as objectively as possible and capture the unedited voice of various communities and individuals in France and internationally. The second reason was an emotional response of some of our faculty at Harvard. And most importantly, their engagement and unconditional support to build this archive. This project was really realized in a very close collaboration with Harvard faculty who not only provided an intellectual oversight and conceptualized this project, but were working hand in hand with the library on the curation of the content. Professor Virginie Green, a scholar of medieval French, created her first and only blog, To Be or Not to Be in Charlie in North America, and she technically launched the call for contributions even before the library decided to take on this project. Another faculty member, Nicole Mills, was in Paris at that time, and she came back with many personal photographs of the silent street of Paris and some of the immediate aftermath, graffitis, posters, memorial gatherings, and many other documents. So a few weeks after the event, the plan to create the Charlie Archive at Harvard was born. My unit, Western Language Division at the Widener Library, took a leadership role on this project. And we have a long history of collecting ephemera and collecting primary source materials. However, this project was very different from everything we've done in the past. For the first time, the library wanted to archive the aftermath of an event as it unfolds. We wanted to gather community-generated primary source content and including born digital material captured on temporal media like cell phones. So the project has presented some very unique challenges requiring the expertise of many staff from many different units of the library, including, of course, collections librarians, liaison librarians, archivists from special collections, and especially metadata and preservation experts, and also many staff from information and technical services. We also required an assistance from the Office for Scholarly Communication, who provided us with legal advice on the creation of the Harvard Digital Commons License Agreement for the collected content. And that was because our prime objective was to create an archive that will be open to the public, an archive that will contain materials that Harvard will be able to freely distribute on the web. And it became very important for this project. In many cases, especially for born digital materials, the authors and creators wanted to donate to Harvard only a copy of their work, and they wanted to maintain all their rights for future publications. We also partnered with Harvard Arts and Humanities Research Computing Center, and that was really great collaboration because DART helped us to get a very small grant for this project for this project. It was the Lasky Barajas Dean's Innovation Grant for Digital Arts and Humanities. And this fund was just a few $1,000s. And it really helped us to hire a programmer and web designer, Luke Hollis, who created the Charlie Archive project webpage. So we started with this webpage, and we simply invited public to contribute. The goal was to collect the content with all the basic and necessary metadata related to each donation, so it can be used for its future processing and cataloging. So it was very slow beginning. Some important questions have been raised: how to incentivize the French public to donate their ephemeral content to the archive to a North American institution, how to promote our project internationally. Fortunately, our project was very quickly covered by our local Harvard campus press, including the Harvard Crimson, the Harvard Gazette, and the Harvard Library blog. And it really helped to spread the news about our initiative. But the real breakthrough happened when the news was picked by French media, and an article was published and republished in a few French newspapers and magazines, including Le Figaro, Télérama, Le Monde. Every time an article was published about it in France, we were receiving an important wave of donation of primary source materials, and that was absolutely critical for this project to be successful. Another important moment happened in January 2016 when we created an exhibit of the collected content to commemorate the first anniversary of the Charlie Hebdo attack. TV5 Monde somehow learned about that, and they came to campus, visit Harvard, and they also recorded the panel, and they produced a very small documentary about our initiative. This attention of the French media, especially TV5 Monde, helped to publicize the project, and it also resulted in another important wave of donation. The Lasky Barajas grant helped us to hire 2 project managers. We hired a student from the Romance Language Department and also a librarian from Paris 8 University, Lola Mirabai. Both project managers played a crucial role in publicizing the project to the French press, to French institutions and archival community, to French organization, association, and many citizen initiative who ultimately donated their content to the archive. The Charlie Archive is truly a first collection of this kind at Harvard. It is what we call a composite archive that reunites mainstream publishing, physical objects, and ephemera, mostly unique and distinctive materials in print and born digital, and also social media. It is really difficult to describe what Charlie Archive is without looking at some examples. So, because the collection is very rich and very diverse. So, just very quickly, I would like to give you a few examples to illustrate the scope and the diversity of these collections. I know that we have, time is really running very quickly, so I'm just going to give you very quickly a few examples. So the first, just to show you, in addition to video recordings that we collected from individuals in France, we also have video recordings of our faculty and students from various departments across the university. It was an oral history project for a class realized by Harvard students to help to create a content at Harvard in the campus. The archive contains hundreds of photographs and documents from marches and tributes to the victim of the attack. Artists painted murals and slogans all over the city of Paris to remember the victims. Many artists and cartoonists donated their content to the archive. This picture is a very particular example. Show the first edition of the Charlie Hebdo torn apart in a small city close to Toulouse, where a riot happened in January the 14th at the hypermarket Carrefour. Nearly 100 of people wanted to buy it, and there were only 20 copies of this publication. Another example of a very unique testimony that we received from a journalist for a press agency that was located in the same building at the same corridor than Charlie Hebdo. The journalist was there during the attack. After, she wrote an email to her family and her friends explaining what happened. It was very emotional and personal description of this particular event. She donated a copy to Harvard. This lady was asked by the newspaper La Libération to describe how she remembered Charlie Hebdo. After the attack, she was so emotional that she simply couldn't do it verbally. So she took all issue of the Charlie Hebdo that she had, more than 1,000 individual titles, and she put it everywhere in her apartment to reflect her emotional state. Then she took this picture and she sent it to Libération. It was her answer. This lady gave a birth to her second child after the attacks. To react and describe how she felt at that particular moment, she posted this picture on her blog. This submission is from an artist that played a piano on the street of Paris after the attack. Maybe you remember him since French media broadcasted his image at the time. He wrote a few songs to express his pain, and he also submitted a copy to the archive. Some poets expressed their suffering by creating poems, and they sent them to the editorial staff of the Charlie Hebdo in a sign of support. The material has been published, but they also donated originals to the Charlie Archive. Some donations reflect a political debate that happened in France at that time. This person wrote an open letter to everyone that he called extreme left-wing, who were accusing Charlie Hebdo of being sexist and anti-Muslim. Finally, we received hundreds of personal narratives, different types of personal expressions, slogans and posters from individuals, in many cases anonymous, from France and from many other countries from around the globe. Many of these personal expressions have been collected on the streets of French cities, and they were used during social protest, marches and demonstrations. While collecting and gathering the content was relatively easy, the processing of this collection was challenging and difficult. At least it was at Harvard. At Harvard, we have very high standards when it comes to the processing and treatment of our special collections. And the Charlie Archive was really viewed as an unconventional collection. And it prompted some important questions among Harvard curators, archivists, and librarians. How to collect, how to process, how to catalog and make available to the public a collection that is so composite and so diverse. How to process a collection that is still currently received and that our faculty want to use immediately in their research and teaching. So this internal debate that happened at Harvard was actually very enriching because it resulted at the end in some important collaborative work among Harvard curators, archivists, and technical services staff. And at the end, it helped us to create a new pan-Harvard methodology for processing of this type of content. I can say that the collection had a great impact on many levels. It had an impact on the teaching. It's heavily used in teaching and research at Harvard. The content was used by some of our faculty in class even before we finished the processing. So it helped us to realize that the scholarship in humanities and social science has been evolving and changing very quickly. Our scholars, at least it is the case at Harvard, want to incorporate contemporary, distinctive, unique, and difficult to find primary source materials into the core of the research process. Consequently, academic library will need to collect this type of content from now going forward. The archive had also a great impact on the Harvard research. This is just one example. A group of faculty just engaged in an international collaboration with the French CNRS, Paris-Nanterre, on a common research project in history, political science, and sociology. Their future plan is to pursue a project of cooperation, Harvard-Nanterre, for exchange of students, workshop, panels, and conference. The archive had also a great impact on the local Francophone community of Boston. In October 2016, the French Cultural Center organized a conference on the freedom of speech and a panel on the Charlie Archive collection at Harvard. In January 2017, we organized a physical and virtual exhibit to commemorate the second anniversary of the Charlie Hebdo attack. And these events helped to bring together many Francophone and Francophile from the Boston area for extraordinary moments of exchange, conversation, and debate. So the next step, very quickly, We are currently working on a digital exhibit of the Charlie Hebdo archive that will be curated by our faculty and students, and we are using the Spotlight platform for it. And we hope that this exhibit will help to engage some of our students in digital humanity project that some of our faculty really would like to do based on that collection. One very interesting example is an app for the Charlie Archive collection that we are currently building. This is just a prototype, and you can see that this app, we hope that this app will be used by our user to interact with the collection, interact with the content. It will also allow to post comments and to engage in chats with other users. We also hope that people might use it to contribute new content, personal stories, pictures, videos, blogs, and other resources. And our goal will be to archive users' interaction with the existing collection and in result to create a meta-archive of the existing Charlie Archive collection. So we don't know if it will be successful. It's to be demonstrated. There are numerous issues to be solved before it works. Of course, legal, technological, curatorial, but this is an important development in the conception of this type of mega archive. And finally, to conclude, I just would like to say that building this type of collection is really time-consuming and challenging and require expertise of many staff from the library. A piece of advice to anyone who would like to embark on this type of adventure, I will say that the most important is to make sure that you have a team to do it with an expertise in many areas, of course traditional expertise in collection development, but also project planning, digital project management, metadata and preservation for both digital and analog. Copyright is essential. And finally, the processing of archival collections, both print and digital. Get a small grant that you can use for hiring students, interns, project managers, or web designer. If you want to take a lead on it, make sure that you have some free time for it, because very quickly it can become your second full-time job. And it was the case for me, resulting in working on evenings and weekends to complete that project. And finally, get support from your faculty and students. For us at Harvard, it was absolutely necessary. We were able to do it only because of the unconditional support of our faculty, who made a case to the library administration about why this particular terrorist event should be archived and not another one. And finally, get an approval from your library administration and get a commitment for allocation of all necessary resources before embarking on such project. It was of a crucial importance for us. Harvard has a lot of resources. However, we are a very large and decentralized library system where the allocation of library resources, especially for processing of special collections, can be very competitive. So I think that is very important. And I think that all of these suggestions are, in my opinion, important prerequisite for success for this type of projects. Thank you very much.
So thanks, this wonderful panel, for all of your presentations. Because of time constraints, we won't have time for question and answer here, but I thought it would be good if people do have questions to just raise them and we can discuss them over lunch, and then also at the reception later. If you do have a question to put out to the room and to our presenters, please raise your hand really high and we'll get you the microphone.
Lydia, will you do this again?
Yes, I would. But I think that we learned a lot of lessons, and we will probably do it in a more efficient way, mostly to automate some of the submissions and the content that we collected. We will probably use maybe technology to do it more efficiently. In the beginning, we were experimenting. It was really an experiment, so we did a lot of manual labor. It was good because we had students who helped with that, but I think that there are better way of doing that. And definitely, if I have a faculty in the same way supporting another project, I will do it. I think that the most important piece is to have that faculty component and support from them.
I think your model is, you will be able to offer a model that the rest of us will learn from and perhaps be able to implement efficiently.
I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more. Maybe just raise the question and then.
Yeah, the question I'm raising has been alluded to a few times as far as where we are now in funding for area studies. There's the influx of funding post-Sputnik, post-World War II, and I think the question is area studies under threat? And how do we go forward to preserve the kind of collecting that perhaps is going away and morphing into other areas that are changing that?
That's a